Children are defined as individuals from birth up to 18 years of age. Therefore, you cannot report prenatal harm, but a child born with a positive toxicology can be reported. Youth no more than 21 years of age who have handicapping conditions and are in residential care in certain New York schools for the blind or deaf, or in private residential schools for special educational services may also be reported to the SCR. When identifying suspected child abuse and maltreatment, begin by considering the child. Carefully review what has happened to the child that leads you to believe there is harm or risk of harm to the child. Consider how the parent or other persons legally responsible may be culpable for this condition or circumstance. Always start with the child and establish his or her condition. Then explore the involvement of the parent or person legally responsible for the care of that child. There are definitions you must understand that establish parameters for reporting abuse and maltreatment. Generally, maltreatment involves the quality of care a child receives. Abuse reflects the seriousness of the injury. There needs to be a connection between harm to the child or substantial likelihood of harm and the actions or inactions of the person responsible for the child. Deciding if a report is classified as abuse or maltreatment is the job of the SCR when the report is made or by local CPS during the investigation. The following definitions should be used as guidelines to determine if there is reasonable cause to suspect abuse or maltreatment. Maltreatment, as defined by the social service law, includes a child whose physical, mental, or emotional condition has been impaired or placed in imminent danger of impairment, and the subject failed to exercise a minimum degree of care in supplying adequate food, clothing, or shelter, or in supplying adequate education, or in supplying medical or dental care though financially able to do so, or offered financial or other reasonable means to do so, or in providing proper supervision or guardianship, or by inflicting excessive corporal punishment, or by the misuse of drugs or alcohol, and there is a causal connection between the child's condition and the subject's failure to exercise a minimum degree of care. Or the parent has abandoned the child by demonstrating an intent to forego his or her parental rights and obligations by failing to visit the child or communicate with the child, though able to do so. The Abandoned Infant Protection Act, AIPA, does not affect your responsibilities as a mandated reporter. AIPA does not amend the law in regard to mandated reporters or does not in any way change or lessen the responsibilities of mandated reporters. Mandated reporters who learn of abandonment are still obligated to fulfill their legal responsibility. The definition of abuse. Abuse involves serious injuries such as burns, fractures, head trauma, and internal injuries. The following is a legal definition of abuse from the Family Court Act 1012E. Subject inflicts or allows to be inflicted on a child serious physical injury by other than accidental means, and such action creates or causes a substantial risk of death or serious or protracted disfigurement, impairment of physical or emotional health, or impairment of the function of any bodily organ, or the subject creates or allows to be created a substantial risk of physical injury to the child by other than accidental means, and such action causes or creates a substantial risk of death or serious or protracted disfigurement, impairment of physical or emotional health, or impairment of the function of any bodily organ, or the subject commits or allows to be committed a sex offense as described in Section 130 of the Penal Law. Sexual misconduct, rape, criminal sexual act, forcible touching, persistent sexual abuse, aggravated sexual abuse, course of sexual conduct against a child, female genital mutilation, facilitating a sex offense with a controlled substance. Or the subject permits or encourages the child to engage in any described act in section 230.25, 230.30, or 230.32 of the penal law, promoting prostitution, or the subject commits any acts described in section 255.25 of the penal law, incest, or the subject allows the child to engage in acts described in Article 263 of the penal law, use of a child in a sexual performance, promoting an obscene sexual performance by a child, possessing an obscene sexual performance by a child, promoting a sexual performance by a child, possessing a sexual performance by a child. Identifying indicators. An indicator is a sign that points to or represents something else. Therefore, an indicator for child abuse or maltreatment serves as a warning or alert telling you that more attention should be given to a particular circumstance. There are three types of indicators to consider: physical indicators, child's behavioral indicators, and parents' behavioral indicators. At times, the identification of suspected child abuse and maltreatment may be self-evident and can rest on a single factor: a handprint, a bruise, positive toxicology at birth, or a disclosure made by a child. More often, identifying indicators can be more difficult. Your suspicion that a child has been abused or maltreated may rest on pulling together several indicators or clusters of indicators. Do not view indicators in isolation. Indicators must be considered in relation to the child's current condition or circumstance. The presence of an indicator should be considered in the overall context of a child's physical appearance and behavior. Each of your unique experiences with children needs to be considered when assessing for suspicion. Some of you may see a child once, for example, EMT or law enforcement. Others on a daily or regular basis, for example, teachers or a school nurse. You must carefully determine if the child's behavior deviates from the norm for that child. Ask yourself, what is normal based on what I know of the child and or the developmental stage and the child's age? No two children respond to the same situation in the same manner. Children will have different responses. Also consider the behavior of the parent or other legally responsible individual. If you are being provided information that leads you to suspect abuse or maltreatment, consider the quality of the disclosure and the information you are provided. Ask yourself, is this explanation plausible? Are they repeating gossip, or are they speaking from personal knowledge? What are they saying about the child's condition or behavior? Abuse or maltreatment should never be assumed. Moreover, many abused or maltreated children may not show any of these indicators. Children are susceptible to injuries in relation to their developmental stage. If a plausible explanation is offered, consider the age of the child and the location of a suspicious injury when developing your thoughts about reasonable cause to suspect. This graphic illustrates normal and suspicious bruising areas. Note the normal areas on the left side of the diagram as compared to the suspicious areas on the right side of the diagram. Accidental injuries usually involve injury to the bony prominences of the body, for example, the shins, the elbows, or the knees. For example, toddlers fall while learning to walk. Young children skin elbows and knees when learning to ride a bicycle. Suspicious injuries usually occur in areas not susceptible to accidental age-appropriate areas. This photo illustrates linear markings on a child's cheek caused by the slap of a hand. From this photo, the child appears to be very young. A hand slap to the head of a very young child with enough force to cause this type of mark is clearly not accidental. Consider the age of the child and the type and location of the injury in determining your suspicions. This photo depicts a 3-year-old repeatedly struck on the arm with a looped cord. This photo depicts an intentional steam iron burn to a 6-year-old's arm. Note how clearly the pattern is and the visibility of the steam jet holes. Remember to consider the age of the child, the type of the injury, and the explanation of how the injury occurred.